I owe you to tell you the end of the story with Rachav. I think this was our discussion of 2 weeks ago, not last week. It's Parshat Shalach. It would have been 2 weeks ago. So Rachav, as you recall, the harlot who hid Yeshua and Kalev, the innkeeper, was in the wall of Jericho. So somebody mentioned Deborah, but Deborah's not here this morning, correctly, that from her descended just trying to get it, 8 prophets who were also Kohanim. And that's true. So, and as mentioned 2 weeks ago, she married Yeshua. She converted at the age of 50 years old. And she had been the most celebrated harlot in the world, probably in history ever. And one of the 4 most beautiful women in all of history. They were Sarah, her, Rachav, Abigail, wife of King David, and Esther. And so she's one of the symbols of the power of Teshuvah. So that's the conclusion that I owed you. Shana, you're on. You were correct. You were correct. No, it was Deborah. It was Deborah that pointed this out. Yeah. Okay. So that's wrapping up class of 2 weeks ago, the story of Rachav. Today, we're going to talk about Miriam, because in this week's Parsha, Miriam dies. Miriam dies, we know her yahrzeit, it's the 10th of Nisan. The 10th of Nisan, the end of the 40 years. The end of the 40 years. So the Torah tells us as follows. That in the wilderness, the Jewish people were sustained by, we know, the manna. The manna provided nourishment, food. The clouds of glory protected them from snakes and scorpions and leveled out the terrain as they traveled. It also laundered their garments. So that was the cloud of glory. And then there was the water, a well that, according to several opinions, several views, exactly how it worked. But the consensus is that it was actually a kind of a rock that traveled with them, and the water would well up from this rock. It was like a sieve, kind of porous. So as you all know, sorry, I'll just close this. As you all know, our sages tell us that the manna was in the merit of Moshe Rabbeinu, of Moses, the cloud of glory in the merit of Aaron, and the water in the merit of Miriam. At the end of our class this morning, God willing, we will have a deeper understanding in the light of Chassidus, as the Rebbe explains, why this is so. Why is manna a Moshe Rabbeinu thing? Why the clouds of glory Aaron? And why the water is Miriam? That we'll see, God willing, at the end, the deeper answer. But what we read about in this week's Parsha is, because Miriam dies, the rock disappears. There's no water. Now, the rest of the story is one of the saddest and tragic stories in all of the Bible and all of Torah. And it's the symbol of every tragic story. Every tragic story is rooted in this one, the next one we're not going to talk about today, and that's the story of the death of Moses and Aaron. It's all tied in with the water and the loss of it as a result of Miriam's death. So, but that's not our subject. Subject is Miriam, not Moses, and Aaron per se, and their story. So this is a fascinating, before we get into any depth, just what happened exactly. How did the children of Israel receive water from the well of Miriam? So I'm to read to you from the Medrash that says as follows. So this miraculous water-giving rock traveled with the Jews throughout their sojourn in the wilderness. And when they camped, it would come to rest in a high place facing the sanctuary, which they would put together. It was a collapsible structure, and they would erect it. That was the sanctuary, which later became, of course, the Beis Hamikdash in Yerushalayim. And the water, or rather the rock, would rest right opposite. So how were they all, how did everybody the water receive the water? So this is what happened. This is all hinted to in scripture, but Rashi spells it out from our sages. And it went like this. Each of the 12 princes approached the rock with his staff and then drew a line in the sand with his staff from the rock/well to his tribe. As you know, the tribes were encamped in a specific formation. For the sanctuary was in the center, and the tribes were camped around in 4 groups of 3. 3, 3, 3, 3. 12 tribes. So each one of the 12 drew a line directly to his tribe. And then the water flowed along these 12 lines to all the tribes, forming small rivulets between one tribe and another. Sages say that the river was so large, it wasn't just a little trickle of water, but it was so large that if a person wanted to visit a friend from a different tribe, they'd need a raft. Moreover, the water also encircled the entire camp. Grass, trees, vines, figs, and pomegranates sprang up at its edge, the edge of the water. The vines produced 7 differently flavored grapes. Point being, that the children of Israel, as a result of the water and the plants it produced, tasted of the goodness of the world to come. In fact, later, there's a song that they compose, enshrined in the Torah, about Miriam's well, and whatever we just said now is really extracted from that song/poem. But when she died, the well suddenly disappeared. And as I told you, the people approached Moses and Aaron and clamoring. They were thirsty, they wanted water. Moshe was told, you know the story, to speak to the rock. that didn't work, and he struck it, and the rest of the story which followed. But now, as mentioned, we are zeroing in on Miriam and the significance of this well, and to explain the association between her and the well, Moishe and the manna, and Aaron and the cloud. So first, I should share with you the reason given. The classic reason is this. We're going to go deeper in a minute. But the classic association found in the Medrash is as follows. Moishe gave the Torah. So what's the connection to manna? Simple explanation. If you have manna, so you don't have to work for your sustenance, giving the freedom and the time to learn Torah. Also, our sages tell us that eating the manna refined them and aided them in their Torah study. That's the connection between Moshe and man.
Rabbi.
Aaron and the cloud, because Aaron is the high priest, of course, who serves in the Mishkan, in the sanctuary, the temple. His service elicited the revelation of the divine presence. So the clouds of glory represented the divine presence. What's the connection between Miriam and water? Again, this is simple. We haven't gotten to Chassidus yet. That'll be the end. Historically, maybe you can guess. Where's the first time we're introduced to Miriam, pretty much? What's the story there? She sits by the Nile, by the water, where her mother had placed her brother Moishe. Thanks to her, her brother Moshe is reunited with his mother, their mother, Yocheved. Hence the association between Miriam and water. And therefore, God, because of her act of chesed, of kindness, looking after her little baby brother, so Hashem provides the water with a vital necessity. The Jewish people, this great act of kindness, with a vital necessity, and that is water. Okay, so that's the simple association between the manna and Moshe, the cloud of glory and Aaron, and the water to Miriam. Again, God willing, we will go deeper. But first, some fascinating information that has some practical ramifications. The origin of Miriam's well. Now, we just said, of course, that it's in her merit, but it didn't start with Miriam. In fact, if you look at Ethics of Our Fathers, you'll see that Hashem created 10 things, 10 miraculous phenomena. At the twilight, on the eve of the first Shabbos of creation. And you can see that in Pirkei Avot. And one of them is the well of Miriam. Chapter 5, Mishnah 6, it enumerates all 10 miracles. One of them was also last week's story, the mouth of the earth that opened up and swallowed Korach. And his clan also created twilight of Erev Shabbos, the very beginning of creation. As mentioned, according to the Medrash, it was a rock like a sieve, shaped like a sieve, and it rolled with the Jewish people throughout their travels. When they stopped, they would dig into the sand, and we gave the details right opposite the sanctuary. Now, what happened to the well, to the rock? So there are two traditions. One tradition is as follows. So first of all, you have to know that when Aaron died, the cloud disappeared. But then they all came back in the merit of Moses. The water continued to supply them till his death, and the well. But eventually, that too disappeared either after her death or after Moses. So where did it go? So one view is, if you want to see Miriam's well, this is what you should do. Pay attention. Climb to the top of Mount Carmel. You know where that is. And look out at the sea, obviously the Mediterranean Sea. And you will see a rock that looks like a sieve in the sea. That's Miriam's well. The other view, which is the more commonly held view, is that you know where her well is. In the Kinneret, also known as the Sea of Galilee, in Tveria. And the Medrash tells us a fascinating story. There was once a man with a skin disease who went down to immerse himself in the Kinneret, in the Sea of Tveria, or the Sea of Galilee. The Galilee did 3 different names. And to his good fortune, he immersed right there at the well, and he was healed. The Talmud goes on to say, if you go up Mount Yeshimon and you look out at the sea, you'll see something like a small sieve in the Sea of Tiberias or the Kinneret or the Sea of the Galilee. That's the well of Miriam. We get even more specific details. You can try this. I didn't, to try and locate it. Rabbi Chaim Vital, of course, was the primary disciple of the Arizal, and he wrote down his teachings, on which all of Kabbalah is based, and all Chassidus. He writes like this: as you walk along the shore of the Sea of Tiberias, the Kinneret, towards the hot springs of Tiberias, at the exact midway point, in a place where there are many palm trees on the seashore, parallel to the tower that is atop the mountain, that's where the well of Miriam is. I'm sure there's no tower anymore, or even the palm trees, so it's pretty hard to locate. But he does say it's the midway point. At any rate, so that's, according to most opinions, where is Miriam's well today? It's in Lake Kinneret. Here I mentioned to you moments ago that there's some practical ramifications for that. And that is as follows. Is an ancient custom to draw water from a well or a natural spring right after Shabbat. Why? Our sages tell us that the waters of Miriam's well flow through all the wells and natural springs of the world every Motzei Shabbos, every Saturday night. And so anyone, quote, who encounters it and drinks of its waters gets healing. Therefore, there's the custom to draw Motzei Shabbos, Saturday night. Maybe by divine providence, that water that you draw will be from Miriam's well that passes through all of the subterranean wells and springs of the world on Motzei Shabbos. This has profound spiritual significance too, we will see, God willing. But the practical thing is that what we do draw water Motzei Shabbos. It's a custom, even if you have an urn. You have an urn, of course you have an urn for Shabbos. You can't use hot water on Shabbos. You can't open your hot water faucet on Shabbos, God forbid. You're cooking. You're causing cold water to come into the tank and heat it. Can't use hot water on Shabbos, not for bathing, not for anything. Unless, God forbid, if a life is in danger. But otherwise, no hot water on Shabbos. Mind you, some people, in order to have warm water Friday night, if you close your tank such that no water goes in when you draw on the faucet, then the water that's still in the tank on Friday can, of course, be used throughout Shabbos. Next day, it's lukewarm. Most people don't do that because it's not so simple. Water keeps, you can't close it. Water goes in every time you turn on your faucet. All to say, friends, so how do you have hot water on Shabbos? How do you have a hot tea Friday night or a coffee Shabbos morning? So we all have you have to have an urn, an electric urn, or you have a pot on the fire, a covered fire with a blech. But the simplest thing nowadays is to use an electric urn. So here's the custom. So even though you may still have water in your urn after Shabbos is out, and it's still good for a coffee or a tea that night or the next day, the custom is, no, we're going to use hot water, Motzei Shabbos, fresh hot water. For this reason, because Miriam's well is traveling and blessing all the waters of the world, and you want to draw water fresh that Saturday night. That's a widespread custom. That Motzei Shabbos, Saturday night, at your meal, and you're supposed to have a meal Saturday night. In some ways, it's even more important than the Friday night meal and the Shabbos day meal. Yeah, since I mentioned it, let me just elaborate for a moment. What's the significance of it's called the Malava Malka. Malava Malka means to accompany the queen. Shabbos is the queen or the bride. And when she leaves, we accompany her as if to kind of hold her back as long as we can. The same way that we welcome her Friday night. We start Shabbos early, we're ready early. You want to welcome her into our lives as early as possible, even before the deadline of sunset. And moreover, Friday night in the service, we actually physically turn around at one of the points in the Kabbalat Shabbat, which means to receive Shabbat. That's what it's called, the service Friday night. We turn around and we say, come bride, boy kala, come bride, come bride. And gather and meet her with joy and song. So that's the reason for the meal. The meal, Motzei Shabbos, is she doesn't leave. She's very polite, the Shabbos queen, the Shabbos bride, and we make a special meal for her. She stays for the meal. We want her blessings to spill into the week, into our lives. We want the serenity of Shabbos, the transcendence of Shabbos, to permeate the vicissitudes, the challenges of life of the weekday. Not that we will ignore them, we will deal with them, but with a deep serenity, a deep tranquility, a deep calm, a deep delight. Shabbos is a day of delight. This is all brought by the Shabbos queen, the Shabbos bride. So we make this meal that she participates in, she, the Shabbos, blessing the week to come, continuing the Havdalah service. So that's already there, friends, why that's so significant. But also to add the following. It's an amazing thing. As we've been studying, learning the JLI course, for those of you that have been attending, previous one, and the present one, mind you, we're going to talk about it. Mashiach's coming and the revival of the dead, the ultimate tenet of our faith. So every single physical body that housed a soul is resurrected and perfected and healed. And our sages say as follows: there's a part of the body that is indestructible. It's called a luz. That's the name of the bone that lies at the top of the spine, at the base of the neck. It's a tiny pebble-like, and it can't be destroyed. And it doesn't derive nourishment from anything you eat or drink except for the meal you eat at the mlava malka that nourishes it. The mlava malka, which is post Shabbos, the bridge between Shabbos and the weekday, really means what's really empowering us to do is to bring Shabbos into the world, the Messianic era, when it's going to be all Shabbos. And there'll be eternity. Even the body is eternal. That's tiny bone that where the eternity is manifest indestructibly. And it nourishes from that meal, because that's what that meal is all about. That meal is about the link between Shabbos and the weekday, heaven on earth in simple language, the Messianic era. So at that meal, this bone we all possess draws its sustenance. Another very good reason to have a mlava malka every Saturday night, just incidentally, or not incidentally, but parenthetically, not even so parenthetic. A number of years ago, friends, this goes back to when MTC was in the Cary Square. So we had a guest for Shabbos, a guest speaker, Rabbi Nissan Mangel. Rabbi Nissan Mangel, actually a family friend. He as a child, he was a study partner, Chavrusa, in Cheder with my father-in-law, Shai Treitel, Muhammad's father. He was in Auschwitz as a teenager. He's one of the youngest survivors of Auschwitz. I don't know if he's the youngest, but certainly one of the youngest. He worked in the crematoria. They put him to work to clean out the crematoria. In the strangest, deepest, mystical, inexplicable way, his faith was strengthened. Because in cleaning out the crematoria, those gray ash, he saw tiny little white pebbles. And he knew from, he's a cheder boy, yeshiva boy, about this. It's called the etzem luz, the luz bone. The indestructibility of the Jewish people, not just spiritually. Of course, the souls live on, the bodies. And so in that hell, in that bowels of hell that you and I cannot begin to fathom, and on some level, I have no right to even speak of, but I can just quote him. His faith was strengthened. Truth is, I was witness to it myself on some level. Even before I led the March of the Living, but certainly when I was there. I don't know if you know the story, but it was a year that I was running a daily minyan in Bialik. It was the year that Sister Marla, of the people that built the MTC, she died, and she had 2 kids in Bialik, and we organized a minyan for the kids to say Kaddish for the year. So I'd go every day to Bialik. It wasn't an MTC for the entire year during the week from Monday to Friday. And we had a minyan there, we used to breakfast. And anyway, so it was during that time that the kids went on the March of the Living. I wasn't there, but I was there in the school. So when they came back, many of them were very inspired. Some kids were wearing a talis, tzitzis, talis cotton. And I asked all the kids, what was the most inspiring part of the whole trip? They go to the camps, they go to Israel, without exception. It was the Kaddish in Auschwitz. And I'm listening to this going, the Kaddish, if there's a place on earth where one would question faith, if not abandon it, it would be Auschwitz. And that's where they found faith. It is inexplicable and just points to the mystery of the neshama that's just one with God and cannot be explained. And so Rabbi Mangel, as a young boy, in the fires of hell, He touched with his hands the eternity of our people as they are burned. So back to the Melava Malka. So this, again, Melava Malka means to accompany the queen. This meal nourishes that bone, nourishes the eternity of the Jewish people, not just spiritually, but physically. How do we get into this whole discussion? Because we were talking about the custom that after Shabbos, to draw some fresh water, drink it, even a glass of water. But I've been saying even the water that people have already still there in their urn, they will empty and put in fresh water. Easy thing to do. Have a glass of water after Shabbos. Make a bracha. Make a bracha before and the right bracha after. Drink. Because as the Rebbe explains, spiritually, Miriam's blessing, her waters kiss and touch all the waters of the world. And it's most powerfully expressed this mystical moment of Motzei Shabbos, which is a link between heaven and earth. So as promised, let's go a little bit deeper to explain. Can you hear okay? There's a lot of noise in the background. It's not disturbing you? No, it's okay. If the door is open.
I don't hear anything.
No, it's not.
We don't hear anything, or I don't hear anything.
The deeper connection between Moshe, remember, Moshe and the manna, Aaron and the clouds of glory, and Miriam and the well of water. It's very deep and very beautiful. And we'll try and convey it. Man. So man is food. And food you ingest. And every limb and organ of the body is nourished accordingly. So that represents Torah. In fact, Torah is called bread. Because when you understand something, that's learning, you have to understand. That's the mitzvah. You're internalizing the idea. You're internalizing the idea. It becomes part of you. When we learn Torah, it ought to be, and that's what happens. It shapes the way we see reality. We see much deeper, much clearer, much further, much higher. Because we've internalized it, you understand something. You can ownership, it becomes part of who you are. So Moshe Rabbeinu was the giver of Torah, man. Therefore, the symbol is manna, for it reflects what Torah is, a relationship with God that we internalize because we understand, becomes part of us. However, since we speak understanding, everybody has a different level of understanding. Not two people have the same IQ, and even if they have the same IQ level, it's not quite the same understanding. In the words of our sages, ain't there same shavas? No two minds are identical. Which of course makes communication a huge challenge, because the way I see something or understand it, even the same words, not the way you do. And it's supposed to be that way. It's highly individualistic. So although it's an internalized relationship, not although, because it's internalized and intimate, based on my understanding, then we all have a different relationship. And that's why the manna didn't fall. First of all, it had different tastes, meaning whatever you wanted it to taste, it became. It wasn't a uniform taste for everyone. It depended on you. Like when you learn, understand something, you understand it with your unique taste and appreciation. In Hebrew, interestingly enough, the Hebrew word for reason and taste is the same. Tam, such a common word. It's part of the Yiddish language. Something has a tam or doesn't have a tam means it has taste, Yiddish a gishmak, or not. Because if you understand something, you have a taste. It's pleasurable. And a very different taste. We all have different tastes. We understand things differently. And the Torah itself has so many different levels. There's the simple levels, the stories, there's the halachas, there's Talmud, there's Kabbalah, and within Talmud, there's so many different subjects. And so it's highly individualized, highly particular, just like food comes into the body and affects each organ and limb differently. And different foods have different effects. And not everybody likes every food or to have every kind of food. Different diets for different folks, right? All consistent with this idea of learning. Not everybody should be learning, schools don't get this, but you can't put 25 kids in a classroom and teach them uniformly. It just doesn't work that way. No mind is the same and subjects appeal differently, different subjects. And within the subject, the way it's taught, it's a huge art to be able to teach. Most difficult. So that's manna, and that's Moishe Rabbeinu, the teacher. Hence, manna comes in the merit of Moshe, because Torah is akin to manna, to bread. We're clear? Yeah. Aaron, the clouds of glory. The clouds of glory embraced everybody equally. Everybody. Did I mention the manna, aside from having a different taste, depending what you wanted, that's what it tasted. For you, aside from that, it didn't even fall uniformly. For the righteous, it was already ready to eat. For the intermediate levels, it required some preparation, and for the wicked, it even more preparation. Again, all commensurate to their particular spiritual standing. In contrast to the cloud that embraced everybody and everybody. There were sinners amongst the Jewish people, and they were also part of this. That's represented by Aaron. There's a level of Torah. It says many levels to this, but there's a level of Torah which is beyond understanding. As much as we learn a particular text, I understand that on one level, someone understands it better, richer, deeper. There is a divine truth, a divine infinite wisdom here that's bigger than everybody and encompasses everybody equally. That's Aaron. Aaron embodies that. And we see that Aaron, more than Moses, may come as a surprise to you, but Aaron is a more universal figure than Moses. Universal, I mean for the people. Where do we see this? You see that when Moshe Rabbeinu died, it says the men cried. Not all of them. When Aaron died, everybody wept. Everybody. Because he was the great peacemaker and he embraced everyone. And young, old, men, women, children. He had this connection to Aaron. Because he embodied a level of Torah that goes beyond the intellectual dimension, which is very unique and individualistic, the transcendent, the cloud that hovers. He was the one that went in to the Holy of Holies in Yom Kippur till the whole room was filled with the cloud of incense. Again, consistent with Aaron. That's Aaron. Miriam. Miriam's the water. What does the water do? The water brings food and nourishment to every part of the body. Water comes down. The nature of water, it always finds the lowest level. Aside from it, of all three, water is the most critical to life. The most critical. And that's Miriam. In addition to that, she takes the manna that Moses represents, that Moshe Rabbeinu represents, learning brings it down. Everybody can learn. Everybody has their place. She's the ultimate nurturer, bringing down the theory, making it real, pervading. Water pervades, saturates, drenches with holiness, with love, life-giving waters. That's Miriam. Bring it down, make it real and concrete and accessible to everyone. To everyone. The learning, the transcendence, the cloud, the manna. Some people would say learning, nothing, I just can't really understand. Or Miriam can bring it. She has the way, the language, the empathy, the love, the humility to bring Torah's wisdom to everybody according to their level. That's the unique power of the woman that Rebbe is saying. She represents all Jewish women. And likewise, Aaron's transcendent dimension of Torah, she connects everyone to that as well. So Miriam's unique contribution, the well of Miriam, again, it's the foundation. Water is the foundation of life. But more than that, she actualizes and brings down symbolically the manna, the cloud, to each and every one of us, according to each one of our levels. And therefore, she's the most critical. That's the deeper connection between Miriam and the well. To go deeper, I'm just going to touch on this now. Moses and Aaron. So Moshe Rabbeinu is understanding finite. Aaron, finite revelations of God, descriptive manifestations of God. Elohim. Aaron connects us to the cloud, the transcendent, the infinite. Yud Kei Vav Kei. Miriam, the essence of both, and they fuse both together. Very deep. Need not much more time to explain. But at once the fusion of transcendence and immanence, beyond and within simultaneously. Core essence, that's Miriam. I'm not explaining it or giving you some sense. If you're getting a sense of awe and wonder at Miriam, wonderful. We're talking about, it's a women's class, you. This is the gift of every Jewish woman. For the guy, it's either the Moses or the Aaron. I'll put it in simple language. Aaron is like the simple faith. Faith, which is beyond reason. Moses, the rigorous intellectual. The guy, typically, is one of the other. He's a simple fellow in faith. He's an Aaron person. Or he's a scholar, intellectual. To be a profound scholar and simple at the same time. To have the virtues of simple, transcendent faith concurrent simultaneously with the virtues of intellectual rigor and sophistication and analysis and levels and compartmentalization. That's the power of the woman. That's Miriam. Brings it all down, coalescing it, making it one. Simple and sophisticated. Faith and philosophy. Rational and childlike simplicity. And neither one is compromised, both in their glory and beauty. So Moshe Rabbeinu symbolizes again the teaching, the learning, the rationale, the bread that comes in and internalized, different tastes and different people. Not all foods are for everyone. Everybody needs water. Aaron represents the transcendent, the cloud, faith. And Miriam, the fusion of the two. Rabbi. So the Rebbe says at the end of this talk here, he says, this is the power and the gift of every Jewish woman. But there's another message here, because when Miriam dies, what happens? For a moment, the world disappears and there's panic. The people panic. He says, after 40 years already, and all the lessons and all, they're ready to go into Israel. And the moment she she passes away, there's a huge vacuum and a panic and confusion. The end is that Moshe Rabbeinu has to step in and provide. So the Rebbe is saying to our generation, the guy, you can't just be the luxury of being a guy. Everybody has to be everything. Obviously, the woman has to be the woman. But the guy, we're living at a time today saying, the luxury of the different roles. Everybody's like Moses, the end assumed everything. We all have a spark of Moses. We all got to do everything. We all have to be a Moses and an Aaron and a Miriam. To reach out to our fellow Jews who are in a spiritual desert and thirsting and parched and confused. And today feeling alone and abandoned. God forbid. Afraid. So, as I was saying at the end of this talk here, it was 1953, mind you, but it's always the talks are for then and for the future. All of us, everybody has to be a Moshe and an Aaron and a Miriam. Even though it's Miriam, the Jewish woman, who has this in the most powerful way, but he turns to the fellas and says, you're not exempt. Moses assumed that you learned from Miriam, so will you. Powerful, powerful message at the end of this extraordinary Farbrengen that I'm sharing with you a part of. Okay, dear friends. Any comments, questions? I didn't hear before.
I have a question.
Yes, please go ahead.
I'm just wondering, with the way you described Miriam and the power of the woman in Judaism, which you've touched on before, I'm wondering why we don't have more Jewish women leaders.
I know about 4,000, not all by name. They're called shluchas, and there's no membership to this club. Everybody is invited and inspired to join. And it's a new phenomenon. It's a new thing, because as prophesied, it's only before Mashiach comes that these teachings that I'm sharing with you now, this wasn't around for a long time. It wasn't revealed yet. But the whole virtue of the Jewish woman, like Sarah, really comes out at the end of exile, and you're 100% right. Now's the time, and yeah. But just to add to that, you may have seen it. We had a couple of mosaics ago. I'm talking mosaic, like the High Holiday one, not the most recent, but last year's. A fascinating article that I refer your attention to. If you have it at home, you can see it online maybe. We reprinted it. This was an article published in one of the big English Jewish magazines. The point of the article was, it's a Rebbitzin that writes. She's a Rebbitzin of a huge shul, like Florida, New York, somewhere. And she's describing how in the Orthodox world, there's a huge debates now about the role of the woman, and it's a rabbanit and new titles and stuff. It's a whole discussion. And she wonders, and she sees that in Chabad, there's no such angst. It's the only thing she used. And the struggle for identity. It's what the Chabad Shluchas that she knows intimately. Pretty sure it's Florida. She lives. And she said, we're going to learn from them. They're leaders, but they're not trying to and powerful leaders. In many Chabad houses, she's the driving force. If not, they're equal. And she says they don't have this identity struggle, trying to get new names and new titles. They somehow found their secret to be women, to be leaders as women, not as men are leaders. So the answer to your question, you're 100% right. And it's growing. But what I'm saying is not that the women are becoming leaders in pinstripe kapotas, not the kapotas and black hats like the men, but becoming leaders as women are leaders, as Miriam was a leader, and as women, and this is not a theory. It's at least 4,000 such shluchas leaders throughout the world. And this woman is writing. She's got to read her words. She's saying, you know, we got to learn from them. And stuff. The Narishkeit and our debates and discussions and the politics of it all. They have no politics in this whole issue. And it's so simple, and let's emulate their model.
Rabbi New?
I have a question.
Compliment, yeah.
Sorry.
I don't know who was first. Who was first?
My question is regarding the luz bone.
Yeah.
There's a place in the Torah called luz. Is there any relation between that place and the bone?
Good question. I don't know. There's got to be. So God willing, I'll look into that. It's a very good question.
Thank you.
It's called the same name? It must be. I don't know. So thank you. I'll try and find out.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a very inspiring class, Rabbi. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Baruch Hashem.
Rabbi, Shana, hi, how are you?
Yeah, you don't see you. Okay.
I know, because my camera's not on. I just have a thought, or when you talked about the combination of manna and the clouds and the water, that sort of trifecta, it reminds me of Sarah's tent, where she had the clouds of glory, she had the bread, and she had the waters of mikvah. So it sort of reminded me of that.
Beautiful, yeah. There you go. Yeah, very good connection. Obviously, yeah, that's a good connection. Thanks for sharing. Good.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Rabbi, I watched Unfazed last night.
Yeah, who else watched it?
Yeah, it was great. Terrific. Amazing. So inspiring.
And
Peggy didn't
very
see it?
inspiring.
I have the recording. I'm going to watch it tonight.
Oh, it's amazing. You're going to love it.
Yeah, I'd like to hear all your feedback. Yeah. So what do you say?
It was wonderful from beginning to end. And just talking about women, I just wanted to say